Okay, God just gave me the coolest revelation as I was praying. This is for the person, this is for the girl, this is for the guy who is stuck in a toxic relationship, and maybe you're living with this person and you know that this person is not for you, but you are fearful of like, okay, well, if this person leaves, I won't be able to afford my apartment by myself because maybe you guys split bills, or I won't be able to provide groceries for my kids if maybe you're living with someone and you have kids together and you're just so worried, and maybe you're staying stuck in this relationship because of a financial reason, or maybe you're just so afraid of being alone, or maybe whatever the situation is, and that is what's keeping you stuck in this cycle of not leaving because you don't know how God is going to provide. Maybe you're with someone, or I don't even know, maybe you're married and it's a very abusive relationship and you've prayed and fasted for this relationship, but maybe God has given you a release to leave this relationship. And I'm not condoning having a divorce. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm specifically speaking about toxic and abusive relationships. And maybe you're just like, okay, if God is telling me to leave, how you think of this whole entire laundry list of things of how is God going to provide this for me? How am I going to afford this rent by myself? How am I going to now I have to get a job because maybe you've relied on this person and you haven't worked and they paid all the bills because maybe they were controlling, maybe they were narcissistic and they didn't want you to make your own money. Maybe you don't even have a car and you're like, well, how am I supposed to go and get a job if I don't even have a car? And you start thinking of all these things, but you know deep down God is telling you to leave this relationship. This video is for you. So if you guys know anything about my story or my testimony, if you guys have been following me, then you know that I was stuck in a very abusive and toxic relationship. And that is how my ministry became a ministry on TikTok, is I started sharing my journey of how God led me out of this relationship. And I had some of those same exact fears, so I can relate on everything that I just said. And this is before I got saved. So that relationship, even though it brought me to rock bottom, it literally brought me to the arms of Jesus. But during this relationship, I started hearing the voice of God, and I started hearing him say, leave that relationship. I would have dreams of snakes literally trying to bite me because God was warning me that this relationship was sucking the life out of me. He was warning me that this relationship was poisonous, and if I didn't get out of this relationship, it would literally kill me because it was already killing my self-esteem. It was killing my confidence. It was killing the purpose and plans that God had for me. It was killing everything. And my relationship was not just verbally abusive, but it was also physically abusive as well. And it drained me in every kind of way, financially, emotionally, in every kind of way. This relationship drained me. And as I was praying this morning on what kind of video that God wanted me to release, I was studying in Exodus chapters 1 and 2 this morning. And as I was praying before making this video, I was like, God, what do the people need this morning? Like, what kind of video do you want me to make this morning? And God said, make a video on how I provided for you when you obeyed. How he gave me provision when I obeyed, because so many times we wait for God to give us plan B before we step out because we're so worried, like, God, are you going to catch us if we step out? Are you going to catch us if I take this leap of faith, Lord? Is this really from you, Lord? Are you really telling me to leave this relationship, or are you telling me to work on it? Are you really telling me to leave this relationship, God? But I need a financial miracle to be able to pay my bills. If I leave this relationship, I need to be able to provide for my kids. I need to be able to get to work if I have to get a new job. But Lord, I don't even have a job yet. So don't I need a job before I leave this relationship? Trust me, I was in the same exact boat. And the revelation that God gave me as I was praying, literally God gave me divine revelation, and he always uses my experiences, but he always gives me scripture to be relatable to a story in the Bible, so you guys can not only learn the Bible, but also relate it to the situation that you are going through. So if you guys know the story of Moses and how he was born into Egypt, but he was of Hebrew. He was of a Hebrew background. His parents were believers, but his parents were Hebrew, but they were in Egypt, in slavery, in bondage. And Pharaoh was he wanted to kill all of the males that were Hebrew. So he was telling the midwives, the Hebrew midwives, like, every single person that is born, if they are a daughter, save her, but if it is a male, kill them. And as he saw that the Hebrew midwives weren't listening because they were obeying God and saving the male babies, then Pharaoh was like, okay, put them in the Nile. And because he wanted all the males to literally not grow up in, because the Israelites were already taken over Egypt. And so they were getting fearful because they were about to take over. And so Pharaoh was like, kill every single male baby. Well, Moses' mom literally, because she was a believer, trusted in God that if she saved her son and hid her son for 3 months and then put her son, because she was obeying God, she put her son in the Nile in a basket to hide him. And she had to give up her newborn baby, and she trusted God's provision. But because she obeyed, and she didn't know the outcome, she didn't know how God was going to provide, she didn't know how God was going to save her son, she didn't know how this was going to happen, but she trusted God's sovereignty, that he would save him, that he would protect her son, that he would take care of her son. She didn't know how, but she trusted in him. And because she surrendered her baby to God in the Nile River in a basket, God orchestrated all these events to happen because of her faith and trust in him. So God orchestrated all of this to happen. These are all the things that God orchestrated. So God had this beautifully planned for the deliverance of both Moses and eventually for the people of Israel. He skillfully guided the parents of Moses, the currents of the Nile, and the heart of Pharaoh's daughter to further his plan and purpose. Because Pharaoh's daughter is the one that found Moses. But Moses' cry melted her heart, and she saved a Hebrew boy. And because Moses' mom trusted that God would protect her newborn baby, now Pharaoh's daughter took the baby and gave it back to Moses' mom to breastfeed the baby and take care of the baby, and then used money to pay her. So not only was Moses' mom walking in obedience, but now she got Moses' back and is now getting paid to be Moses' mom. So God not only provided for her and gave her provision financially, but protected her son and gave it back because she surrendered it. And so many times in my life, God has done that, where he's told me to leave that toxic and abusive relationship. And I was like, okay, God, how are you going to provide for me? And this is at the point where God literally told me to quit my job at the same time of going through this breakup. I was living in a 2-story house, and I'm like, how am I going to provide? Because my ex who was living with me at the time was paying half the rent with me, but it was my house. And so now that we broke up, God told me, leave that relationship. Now, all of a sudden, I was going to have to pay double what I was paying with no job. I was trying to do everything. I was trying to sell all these materialistic things just so I could pay my rent. But if I had not been in such a low spot to be in an impossible situation, I would have never seen the glory of God provide for me. And the same thing happened with Moses and his mom. If she had never done that act of faith, she would have never seen the glory of God, and Moses would have never delivered Israel out of Egypt. Had she not, imagine if she listened to Pharaoh and killed Moses, all of those Israelites would still be in Egypt in bondage. But because she trusted and obeyed God, Moses lived and delivered the Israelites out of Egypt. Because I left that relationship, I now have a ministry. I now have an entire book on this that has saved thousands of women and men's lives. And God provided for me in every single facet that I needed provision in. Financially, he moved me out of that house. He sent divine helpers. But had I not obeyed and listened, I would have never seen the glory of God. And I don't know who I'm speaking to right now, but just trust and obey God. Trust and do what he's telling you to do. Be obedient, because I promise you, he will not tell you to go do something if he didn't already have a plan to provide for you. And Philippians 4:19 says that he will supply all of our needs. Everything that you need, God will supply. And if you are in a toxic relationship and you don't know how to leave, literally I suggest getting my book, because I tell you every single thing that God did in my life when I obeyed and left this relationship. I was in a 2-year court case with my ex, but God came through. God provided every single thing that I needed, and I had no friends then. I had nothing back then, not even $1 to my name. And I watched God provide for me for 6 months without a job, miraculously. And that is what strengthened my faith. So if I'm speaking to you, get my book, and I promise you, it's going to help encourage you to leave that toxic relationship. I pray that this video reaches who it needs to reach. I love you.